Okay, I'm just going to wait for some people to join, and it's been a while since a couple of weeks or just over since I've been doing any lives on the Tina page, mainly because, as some of you know, my son and daughter-in-law a couple of weeks ago had a little baby girl. So I'm now a nana to 3 grandchildren, a 9-year-old, a year-old, well, just over a year, and a little baby girl. She was 4 weeks early, and so was kept in hospital because she was quite jaundiced. She weighed just over 5 pounds and dropped down to about 4 pounds while she was in because she was so jaundiced. She was then allowed out, but taken back in the other day due to the jaundice levels and that. So she's back out this afternoon, and oh, she's tiny. She's wee. She's sort of, wow, she's really, really wee. But she's absolutely gorgeous, and she's called Isabella. She really suits her name. She looks just like her daddy, and she's got such gorgeous eyes. Her eyes were well and truly open just before she was taken back into hospital, looking around, staring directly at me. Got a lovely video of her doing it. And so I've not been on the Tina page for a while doing lives, but I'm back now. Now, the reason for today's live is, as the title suggests, it's to do with postnatal depression and COVID. Now, there was an article by Sky this morning that was discussing postnatal depression since COVID and how it's increased. Now, in the article, there's an organisation for pre- and postnatal depression called Panda, and the organisation stated that the calls to their charity have increased by 240%. That's just the calls. Emails have increased by 150%, and that's because of various factors, but some of the main contributing factors to the drastic high increase in calls to Panda, the organisation, and other mental health organisations, is for pregnant couples. So the past year, anybody pregnant since COVID, when they go for a scan, the woman has to go in on her own. She can't go in with a partner. Now, this is taken into account that her partner will, majority of the time, be living with her 24/7. They've probably got children, etc. Go to the shops, do everything together, but the partner's not allowed in to the scan or any subsequent scans. He's not allowed to attend appointments. When labour comes on, he's not allowed to be in there from the beginning of labour. He's only allowed in there once labour progresses to the point that baby's about to be born. And afterwards, if they're kept in for a day, 2 days, whatever, they're only allowed up for 2 hours a day. Then you have the examples such as if baby is unwell and is taken back into hospital, like happened with my granddaughter, only one parent is allowed in to stay with baby. The other parent isn't allowed to visit at all. So if the baby is kept in for a few days, the other parent, and obviously it's going to be the mum that stays in with baby, the other parent, the dad, is not allowed to visit at all. That's no visits whatsoever. They're not allowed to go in and see mum, they're not allowed to go in and see baby, they have to stay away. That said, the mum can go down out of the hospital into the car park to be with her husband for a little while and then go back into the ward. That's not right. And if you go and take this back a step to the scans and things like that, the partner's not allowed into the scan. The whole point to scan is to check baby's okay and that everything's normal, everything's fine, the baby's growing at the rate expected. Now, Parents are nervous enough as it is when they go to a scan, but if they are forced to go in on their own, which is what has happened through COVID, if anything's wrong with that baby, or God forbid the baby doesn't have a heartbeat, that parent gets told on their own with no support there whatsoever. That's wrong. That is so wrong. It's wrong because, well, on many levels, but think about it from the perspective of the parents live together. Majority of the time, they live together 24/7, but they're not allowed to go into the scan. Now, let's go back a few months to last year when this was happening. Parents weren't allowed in together for the scans, for appointments, and so on. And yet, you and me and others could sit in a pub or restaurant without our masks on and eat and drink, laugh, joke, etc. in a pub or restaurant full of people we don't know. Okay, so that's all right, but what isn't allowed and what isn't right is for the partner to go in with their partner to a scan or to baby appointments or during the full labour. And if baby is unwell and gets taken into hospital, the parent's not allowed to be in there with the other parent at all. That is not right. There is no rhyme nor reason to implement those sort of draconian measures. There isn't. Whichever way you look at it, it's wrong. And that has increased postnatal depression alarmingly over the past year. And we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. As the months progress, that iceberg, we're going to start seeing it getting bigger and bigger. We're going to see increases in all these figures. And nothing's being done. Nobody's questioning it. Nobody's saying, hold on a minute, why is it being why are we allowed to go out into restaurants and pubs last year and eat with 5 other members at our table and in a packed restaurant or pub with other strangers, but we're not allowed to go in with our partners when they're pregnant or giving birth or when baby's taken into hospital? These are the questions that need to be asked. It's not about being a COVID denier. It's not about being an anti-vaxxer. It's not about making things up. It's stating facts. You've got one side where they're saying, it's okay, you can sit in a pub and a restaurant with 5 other people at your table and meter away loads of other people in a pub and restaurant in a self-contained area, small building, but that's fine. But what's not fine is for a parent to go in with the other parent for scans, for appointments, during labour, for the whole labour I mean, and if baby's unwell. And I know how it's affected my family because, as I said at the beginning of this, my daughter-in-law and son were expecting a baby through COVID, and my son wasn't allowed to go to scans, he wasn't allowed to go to appointments, he was only allowed into the labour ward towards the end of the labour. Baby was kept in hospital because of being 4 weeks early and unwell. He was only allowed up for 2 hours a day. They were allowed out, and then baby got taken back in the other day because of jaundice and being unwell. Only my daughter-in-law was allowed to be with baby. My son was not allowed to visit at all. And regardless of whichever way you spin this COVID crisis, that's wrong. And questions need to be asked. Why are you allowing these things to happen and not these things? I think it's more important that parents are allowed to be together during pregnancy, during labour, and when a baby's unwell, than it is for you to go and sit in a pub with 5 people at a table and strangers at other tables in a confined space without wearing masks. I think that we've got that all wrong. And if me questioning and asking these questions makes you say I'm a COVID denier or anything else, then so be it. But it's not. It's me asking straightforward questions, questioning where people get off making those sorts of decisions that affect mental health. Mental health during COVID has increased beyond what anybody could even begin to see. And we're only at the tip of the iceberg. This is getting beyond control. There is, and for the organisations out there and the people who are trying to help those who are suffering from postnatal depression, and it's not just mums that have postnatal depression, dads get it as well. And if you want to look at it medically, look up the term postnatal depression. It's not about women who have just given birth. So before you start jumping saying men can't get postnatal depression, check your facts and what it actually stands for, because it has increased. And as I said in this live, Panda, the charity organisation for postnatal, prenatal depression, etc., has had a 240% increase in calls to its charity hotline and a 150% increase in email to them. That tells you something. So we need, as a community, as a nation, we need to say, okay, so you're saying the virus exists. Whichever side of the fence you fall on, whether you believe it or you don't believe it, or you're 50-50, whatever, doesn't matter. What does matter is that we've been forced into 3 lockdowns. And during that time, we've been told masks don't work, don't bother. Masks suddenly do work and it's mandatory. Then we have, you can't meet up in groups. You can't do this, you can't do that. Then we're told, eat out to help out, and you can take your mask off and sit in a pub full of people and restaurants, etc. During all that time, nobody has thought of the impact that all of this is having on people's mental health. People who didn't suffer from mental health issues are now suffering from mental health issues. PTSD isn't exclusive to those in the forces and those who have had major trauma. It's anything that causes a trauma to a person that affects their mental health. And COVID and everything that's been going on has done that. It is causing PTSD for many, many people. And we're not seeing the full effects of this. And it's horrendous for those parents who are expecting a baby, just had a baby, or have got a baby ill in hospital. Now, I know from people who are in Raigmore, who have been in Raigmore recently, that the hospital is dead. It's a ghost hospital. There's virtually nothing going on in there. And one woman who was in the labour ward gave birth and had her baby taken off her because she had a COVID test and the test results didn't come back for 24 hours. So her baby was taken off her for 24 hours. But get this, and this beggars belief, the dad, who was constantly going backwards and forwards to the hospital, going to shops, going home, etc., was allowed to go and see his baby. But the mum, who just given birth, and the first 24 hours are critical in that bonding process, wasn't allowed. But hey, for a good few months last year, we were allowed to sit in pubs and restaurants without masks. Now, we need to be very vocal. We need to start questioning the governments and the MPs and the MSPs, asking, what scientific and medical data have you got that makes you make rules where parents can't be together for scans, appointments, in labour, or if a child's admitted into the hospital sick. And this isn't just babies, actually. This is any child that's admitted into hospital. They're not allowed to have both parents there. They're only allowed the one parent. The other parent isn't allowed to go up at all. And that's not lies. That's not myth. That's not make-believe. That's fact, because my family have been on the receiving end of that. Who makes up these draconian measures? What facts, scientific and medical data do they have that says you can't do that, but you can go and sit in a pub, you can go and do this, you can go and do that without a mask? It doesn't add up. None of it does. And not only have they enforced those types of draconian measures, but also there has been no infrastructure, no support, and no proper financial input for any organisation, charity, or person who is trying to help the mental health of others in our communities. And trust me, I mean, there were 4 suicides off the Keswick Bridge, and that's just the 4 I know of. And then there's all the other attempts and, meltdowns and depression, and it's all on the increase. We need to do something. We need to ask these questions. We need to say, hold on a minute, show us what you're doing to support people with mental health issues since COVID. What are you doing moving forward? Because it's not just about the virus. Mental health is as important as your physical health, and the mental health of communities, of the people, not just in Scotland, in England, Wales, Ireland, but across the world, has been drastically affected. And that is where we need to start looking. We need to start asking questions. We need to hold these MSPs, these MPs, and the governments, Scottish, English and Welsh, accountable for what they're doing and the draconian measures they have. And it is draconian. It's not, you cannot tell me that it's not draconian to force parents apart but allow people to sit in pubs and restaurants without a mask. None of it adds up. So we need to ask these questions. I'm asking these questions. I just don't understand why others aren't, why people are being so quiet on this, because it's important. We need to know what is being done. Why have they stopped parents from being together? Who, think about it. Just think about the fact that more often than not, those parents live together 24/7. They've got a family, they go out together, they go shopping together, etc. But one parent isn't allowed to go to the scan, isn't allowed to know whether their baby's okay in that scan. And the parent that's in there, if that scan shows anything wrong, has to face that news on their own. I mean, that's psychologically damaging for starters. And then, of course, there's the impact it has on the parent that's left to wait outside the hospital. And then you've got, they're not allowed to go to any appointments, not allowed to go into the labour ward until the end of the labour. It doesn't add up. None of it does. And when you're on the receiving end of it, you can really see how badly it affects people. So we need to start asking questions, all of us, no matter what side of the fence you fall on, whether you are completely for the lockdowns and believe that X, Y, Z, or whether you don't, or whether you're 50-50. I don't care. The fact is, you cannot deny that mental health has been drastically affected. And not just for people who had mental health problems previous to COVID, but since. There are people who were completely okay, not got depression, not suffered with mental health issues, who are now suffering because of a year's worth of lockdowns and enforced regulations. So we need to ask questions, and we need to find out what the stats are, and we need to ask our governments, the Scottish government, the English government, what they're doing to combat that moving forward. Because as it stands at the moment, nothing is being done. Nobody is asking why. Why are you stopping parents from being together? Why are you stopping parents from being with an ill child in the hospital and only allowing one parent in? None of that's right. And it has to be asked, and it has to be, proper answers have to be given. Because if you're telling me that that's okay to stop parents from being together at scans and appointments and labour, and that it's okay to stop a parent from being there with his sick child, but it's not okay to keep the pubs and restaurants closed, it's okay for people to go in without their masks in a pub full of other people, but that's okay. No, sorry, none of it adds up. and it needs to be dealt with. It needs to be dealt with now. More people need to be asking these questions, and so does the media. The media needs to start asking these questions. The media is really good at jumping on the bandwagon saying, oh, deaths have gone up, COVID tests have gone up, etc., etc. Oh, they're very good at all the shite stirring and the scaremongering, but they're not really asking the really necessary questions about mental health. Physical health is important, but so's mental health. And mental health has a direct impact on your physical health. But that's being ignored across the board. So we need to question it. We need answers. We need not just the public to stand up and start asking, what are you doing? Why have you done this? But we also need the media to grow a set of balls and start asking these questions, proper questions, and not just quickly giving it a glance over, because that's not going to work. So we need answers, and we need to start looking after the health of people mentally. We need to start putting infrastructure and funding in place for organisations and charities, and those that really are on the front line dealing with mental health issues, and give them the support they need. And that's all I came on to say about that, is that it's about time we all started asking questions. I'm going to ask questions. I'm not going to be quiet anymore. Well, I haven't been quiet per se, but I am going to start asking. So you need to get behind it. You need to start, because there are people you know who are in exactly that position, who have or are pregnant, who are on their own, not allowed their partners in to scans, etc., whose children are in hospital and only allowed to have one parent with them. The other parent's not allowed in at all. We need to start questioning it. Okay, that's my rant for this one. I'm going to come back on and do another live in a few minutes to do with COVID again. So I'll see you then.